Tell Us How to Make It Better is partnering with the Readiness Lab, the home for podcasts, webinars, and training in the field of emergency and disaster services. I'm George Siegel, and this is the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. Every week we introduce you to people who are working on real-world problems and providing actual solutions. Thank you for joining me on the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. The reason I started this podcast was to bring you interesting stories about people who have found a problem that exists in their town, in their city, somewhere in the world, and rather than just complain about it, they're trying to do something to make it better. All of the experts that I've interviewed for my podcast and in my documentary film, The Last House Standing, talk about the problems we face now and in the future from climate change. Well, my guest today is Alan J. Hesse. Alan believes that learning about any difficult or complex subject should be inspiring and fun, and he draws upon his belief to leverage his artistic talent and conservation background to spread awareness and inspire action to address global climate change. Alan, welcome.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, I was looking at what you're doing, and I think it's really impressive. What is the problem or issue that you've been working on that we can talk about today?
Well, as you mentioned, it's climate change right now. That's my main focus. I started off with the conservation, and I'm still a conservation biologist. But during my work with conservation, I started realizing how the impact of climate, of global warming, increasingly is affecting people like farmers, stakeholders whose very survival hinges on whether or not it's going to rain, where it's going to rain, how often it's going to rain, things like this. And so the weather in any given location is so linked to the way that land is managed. And so that ties into conservation, automatically. So the issue is conservation. That is now my main focus. And it particularly, drilling down, I would say climate education. Climate education, helping to get everyone on that page, speaking the same language, understanding the terms, because it's such a big subject, it's such a big complex subject, and it's really easy to misunderstand things and get confused. And that's why I started writing, drawing comic books about it, because I thought that's a great way to spread the messages and the science in a really fun way, which is entertaining and palatable, bite-sized chunks of information.
I don't think people really understand when they hear the term climate change, like you said, they're thinking that it's a simple thing. It's like, okay, wow, the climate's changing, so we have to stop that. But there are so many things that it affects, like you said, right down to where people might locate a wind farm or where people might decide to grow their crops or do certain things around the world. That does it ever feel overwhelming? Like there's so many different things. How are we going to make a dent in this?
It's massively overwhelming, and so you tend to. I've seen reactions, from outright denial, all the way through to just doom and gloom, and that just like it's too late. We can't do anything. There are articles going around saying that individual action is pointless. And then in the middle, there's that kind of head in the sand, reaction where I'm just going to avoid the issue because I don't know what I'm going to do about it. These are all very natural, human reactions to something as complex as this. And so it's really important to not put your head in the sand and, and understand the situation. And and also know though that there's a lot of positive action out there. There's a lot of optimism also. I'm very optimistic about it, actually.
Oh, that's nice. And you're trying to change it in a way, I guess you would say, through the comics that you write, these books. Does it give awareness? Does it point out certain situations? Tell us about what the theme is and how that works.
Sure. These are graphic novels actually, rather than comics, because they have a whole storyline. And it's a series, The Adventures of Captain Polo. Captain Polo is the polar bear that is behind me in these images. And it's designed for kids, middle grade kids, but also many adults enjoy the books as well. And it's all about really not sugarcoating the facts. So I do a lot of research. Sometimes I research for a whole year before a given book. And the research enables me to put out the facts as they are, across the world, different aspects of climate change, global warming, how it affects people all around the world, people, environments, ecosystems, and all this. But also the things that are being done about it. People are adapting to global warming all around the world in different ways, and people are also mitigating the effects of climate change. And mitigation is one of the key terms, like technical terms in this area of knowledge, and it means basically cutting down on the things that cause climate change in the first place. So all this goes into the books, but it's done in a way which is entertaining because it's a story, it's a fiction story, which is full of adventure, full of humor. There's geographical settings, everywhere, which are very accurate. And so you get caught up in the story and the characters. And along the way, I keep on plugging these bits of knowledge, this non-fiction pieces of information in there, but in a way that's sort of blended with the fiction, blended with all the humor and the fun. So you don't really even see it coming. That's the idea.
Can you give us a specific example of something in one of the books that might be pointing out an issue and then telling people what they can do to make a difference with that?
Well, there are many examples of that. I think one of the scenes in the third book is where Captain Polo is in Europe. He is in London giving a talk to school kids in a school, and the kids, can't believe that they're seeing a talking bear, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for fun there. There's kids in the back sniggering and making fun and all this. But the kids ask Captain Polo, what is this thing, climate change? And so Captain Polo tries to explain and gets interrupted constantly by kids asking more and more questions, because that's what happens in the classroom. You start explaining stuff, and kids will interrupt and ask more questions. But they end up asking him, "Well, what can I do? What can we do?" And so there's an opportunity there for my character to lay out a couple of basic actions that you can do in your house. Like watch your diet. Reduce the way you use, reduce food waste. Try and go for more plant-based diets. In your household, meal times, and other things like use public transport more. These are all basic, widely recognized, practical solutions for sustainability that are widely accepted. And it's just a way of bringing those messages across in a fun way, which is visual.
Yeah, I think people. I interviewed a woman who has a book about 52 ways you can help combat climate change. And when I first saw that, I have to, sometimes I can be a little cynical and I'm kind of rolling my eyes and go, that's not going to make a difference. But then I'm reading the book and I go, wait, I already do a lot of these things. And now I'm going to be aware of them. I'm throwing out this old printer. Well, why don't I find a way to recycle it where somebody might be able to use the parts for it? Or, throwing out leftovers. Why are we buying so much food where we're having to throw out leftovers? But that's such an important thing, yet you really got to get a lot of people doing it to make a difference, don't you? Or is it really just going to start one person at a time?
Well, that's the thing. It's this continuum of behavior change, which is a whole other subject, very, very fascinating. And it does start with individual actions. And you get to a point where, because of peer pressure and because of people observing others, you get to a point which is kind of like a tipping point, where it becomes a new social norm. And I think the best example of that is the anti-smoking, the anti-smoking campaign that started in the 70s. And at first it was considered, only a few people are going to stop smoking. It's never going to achieve anything. But we saw what happened, right? The confluence of policy making with public opinion, social marketing, all of this influencing behavior. And it's been flipped completely in 30 years. It's been flipped upside down. Now smokers are kind of like isolated, have to smoke in little glass bubbles, looking crazy. Whereas in the 60s, if it was cool to light up, and it's just completely flipped. So it can happen through individual action, but it does take a lot of things going around it, including policy, including campaigning, a lot of organization on a massive scale.
Yeah, I thought years ago I could solve the smoking problem by I thought all smokers should have to wear space helmets, because that way
Right.
the smoke is contained in their own spot. But I think smoking to me is what, like with a lot of things that people do that are bad for other people. The people that do it are
Yeah.
so concerned about their rights, they don't care if their smoke is blowing in your face. They're just worried about it where they are. I live in Tampa, and if you go over to St. Pete and walk along some of the restaurants along the coast over there, or even down to Miami, there's a lot of people smoking cigars. And all of a sudden, the whole street smells like a cigar because one guy is sitting there smoking a cigar.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's probably one of the obstacles you face with this is people that just don't think beyond themselves.
Yeah, well, for sure, because whenever you see that a change needs to be made in your lifestyle, the first reaction is pushback, and I include myself. It's difficult to change, and even more so when someone comes along telling you have to change. That usually doesn't work. It has to come from a state of knowledge. It has to come from a state of attitude change, where you have realized the issue, you've realized your role in that issue, and you've looked at your peers, you've seen other people doing stuff, and you've made the attitude change to hey, maybe I can get on this bandwagon. But it's very difficult to make that change, but it can happen with the right circumstances.
Yeah, I'm probably less optimistic than you, although I think I'm probably rooting for the same outcome in that we can't even get people to agree whether you should wear a mask or not wear a mask. We can't get people
Oh
to
yeah.
agree if something is good for everyone versus good for just a few people. It seems like the world is so divided. Does that make your task harder, or does it give people a safer space where it goes, okay, we're not going to fight about this, but I think people do fight about climate change. How do you combat that?
They do fight about these things. These are emotional issues. Like I say, when you see a threat to your lifestyle, the first reaction is to defend your ground. That is a very difficult thing to get past. And I think the solution does come with education gradually, which is why I'm targeting kids right now, because a lot of mistakes that are being made right now and have been made by past generations, maybe some of those mistakes can be avoided if the children of today are growing up with a different mindset right from the outset. And a lot of those kids also influence their parents. It's a well-known phenomenon. Anyone who's a parent will know that their kids coming home with new ideas, or actually quite powerful influence on adults. And so to get past these divides, you need to get past the emotional involvement with it. And I think bringing information in a way that is easy to assimilate and also fun is really key, because when we learn something while having fun doing so, we will tend to remember that lesson, and it kind of gets to us. It kind of lands, and so it's a slow process, and it will never be complete. It will never be 100%, but I think every little bit will help.
A lot of times in this country, the United States, it takes a major disaster to wake people up to how they may need to change. For example, my film, The Last House Standing, is about in Mexico Beach, Florida, where that whole community was wiped out. And then, okay, now we have to rebuild. Are we going to rebuild smarter? And you see that in different places that flood, that burn down, that have problems. But a lot of times we don't learn from that, and they end up building back maybe slightly better than before, but they're not building to survive the disaster that hit them. So when you try to educate people, how do you get them beyond? I mean, okay, a disaster wakes them up, and then a few days later, the sun is out, and if they weren't badly damaged, they forget about it. How do you ingrain that in their minds that they really need to change their thinking?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. It's all about, making that relation between the here and now, which may be, oh my God, the hurricane arrived and destroyed my house and my neighborhood. That's the here and now. And you have to make that connection with the causes of these things, which is maybe not in the here and now. The fact is that global warming is causing ocean temperatures to rise at the surface. And this has a direct effect on the weather systems in the oceans. And one of those consequences is increased hurricanes, increased frequency and increased gravity of these major elements of weather, major climate disasters. But you have to make that relationship between the personal consequences of these events and their cause. And that's difficult. And that comes with gradual sharing of targeted information. Again, if the information is a long scientific report, no one's going to read it except the experts who know already. Yeah. So I'm all about not preaching to the choir. I'm all about talking to those who are not already on board with all the science. And I'm all about talking to the bus drivers, to the bank managers, to people in different sectors of society, who all suffer the same consequences, but who don't have a lifelong interest or investment in environmental issues necessarily. Those are really the targets, because I think everyone needs to understand the basics of how our planet works. After all, it is our home.
Yeah, I think if you wake that group up, I mean, that's one of the other things we stressed or pointed out in our film, is that if we're waiting for the people at the top to make decisions that will benefit all of us, we're going to be waiting forever. So what can we do now to put our fate and maybe a little more in our own hands? Having a safer home, choosing a better location to live, doing environmentally conscious things that might help with climate change. I think it starts more at the bottom. And I think that's what you're doing with your stuff.
You're right. It does start at the bottom. And also, if everybody's on board with this, their constituents, after all, they're constituents. And the decision makers in power, the politicians, want votes. If they're smart, they're going to do what their constituents want them to do. And so a very powerful action for all of this is to vote intelligently. Do your homework, understand who the candidates, what do they stand for, and pressure them. Put pressure on your local. In Britain, they have MPs spread around the land, and you can put pressure. People have access to their MPs, members of parliament. And in the States, you have similar arrangements at state level. And so you're getting it bottom up. I completely agree with you, George, because, it's, I think, the decentralized governments like you guys have are really good for that. Because I know that many, many states, governors are really pushing for really, really cool climate action and very, very, very intelligent steps.
Yeah, sometimes it seems completely misguided and driven by financial interests. It's not always so clear cut. But I read an article recently about just how places like New York City are going to have to start learning to deal with hurricanes more. And there's a lot of areas up there that are building to codes that are not even close to being able to handle major disasters.
Yeah.
So true. I think it's potentially very scary. So what advice do you have for people who have an idea like you and they want to do something, but for whatever reason, they're just not getting in there and trying it because you're actually doing something? What would you tell people that are thinking about doing something, but aren't quite doing it?
Well, I would say a lot of importance, too much importance is given to academic qualifications and things like this. There are so many resources out there for anyone for free on the internet to get some basic knowledge about the subject. It's very easy to do that now, and it's free. you don't have to be a qualified scientist to start making impactful actions for sustainability and to reduce climate change. We can all do something. And I think what the message I always give is, if you're good, find out what you're good at. Discover, identify what it is you're good at or passionate about, and see how you can make that count for the higher purpose. So you might be an artist or a singer, a performer. You might be an author. And how can you use those skills and those interests in your life to channel that towards making a difference in some way? And I think a lot of value is in actually talking about these subjects amongst your friends, amongst your neighbor, with your family. Things start by conversations, and humans are social creatures. We all take decisions based on emotions, and when we hear each other talk about things, it kind of sparks ideas, creativity. So I think it's basically the nutshell is, don't wait to become an expert in a subject like climate change. Find out what you can online. There are so many free resources, and then start conversations, do what you do, try and make it count for that message, for that purpose.
Now,
that makes sense.
No, that's great advice. Now, getting back to your book for just a second, your series, does it deal with the doom and gloom aspect of it at all? Or does it talk about, from a positivity standpoint, how we can be better? Does it show you what happens if we aren't better?
It makes fun of the doom and gloom aspect. It kind of pours ridicule on the doom and gloom. And I can get away with that because my character is a non-human. He is a bear. So he can make fun of humans who are doom and gloom humans, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
And I have a scene in the third book where Captain Polo is in Cairo, Egypt, and nothing to do with the fact that it's Cairo or Egypt, but he meets a guy who is a doom and gloom caricature. And I just had a lot of fun with that. It's just one page. I had a lot of fun with that scene because the doom and gloom character, wails and laments about the rising sea levels and how those are going to invade Cairo within a couple of years, and that all the seawater is going to flood into the fresh water, which are real threats. But his attitude is one of, there's nothing we can do. It's too late. And Captain Polo tells him that's not true, that there's plenty of people already working on those problems around the world, and that instead of wailing about it, why don't you do something about it? And the guy doesn't understand, continues to wail, and Captain Polo just whacks him into the air, and the guy flies over the roofs because as a bear is very strong. So that's the kind of the ridicule poured on the doom and gloom, as in, we don't have time for doom and gloom. We can't afford to go down that road. That's not the way to go. So yeah, I do bring it in a fun way. Again, the format, the fact that it's comics, cartoons, enables me to put humor in there and make it all a bit fun.
What do you think of movies that are doom and gloom scare movies, like Twister, San Andreas, The Day After Tomorrow?
I think they had their time. I mean, they're purely entertainment. It's entertaining. But then you have movies like Don't Look Up, which just came out recently, which show a much more intelligent kind of argument.
Did you like that movie?
I did like the movie. Although it had a lot of doom and gloom in it, because at the end everyone dies. But I think the perspective was one of this is what happens if people don't listen to the science. This is what happens when people don't listen to the common sense. For that reason, I thought it was powerful. I don't think actually the word "like" is the right word. It was a powerful movie in that sense, but it was also depressing.
Well, that movie to me was filled with actors that I love, that I think are some of the most talented people in the profession. I just didn't feel it showcased their talents in a way that was good. It's like for me to find any enjoyment in it, I had to look at the underlying message, which is greed and stupidity over safety, which was what I took as the ultimate message.
Right.
But I don't know. I thought it missed the mark, but I posted that on social media and some of my friends completely disagreed with me. And that's the beauty of debate. It's like,
Yes.
I don't get mad if you disagree with me. It's my opinion. You have your opinion. I think that should be fine.
Yeah. I thought Leonardo DiCaprio I actually personally thought he did a great job with his character. His character was the non-communicating scientist who is wrapped up in his data, has no idea how to communicate. Maybe a bit of a caricature there, of course, a bit of a stereotype, because there are plenty of scientists who are great communicators. But, stereotypes, they exist for a reason.
Yeah, I thought they wasted Meryl Streep and that. I don't know. I mean, we can pick at the film, but you're right. The underlying message rung very true.
Yes. Yeah. It's a message which is not palatable, but important. I wonder how many people get the message, though. That's the other thing, right? It can be wrapped up in a way that not everyone immediately identifies with or gets. And
that's true.
You might walk away saying, well, what was all that about? They all died. And so it's risky. It's risky, but it's interesting to see these kind of shifts in perspective now. The typical disaster movies, which are kind of idealistic at the end of the day. Maybe they've had their time. I don't know. I'm certainly no authority on any of that.
Hey, I grew up in California, and after watching San Andreas, which I've probably seen 20 times, I don't ever want to go back there. I mean, I've been in a lot of big earthquakes.
That was a good movie, though.
Scared the crap out of me. Yeah, it was.
I know.
It was entertaining.
A great movie. It was certainly entertaining. Yeah, but entertainment and education, that's something I very, very passionate about. I think they need to go together. Entertainment and education can go together very quickly.
So what's the best way for people to get your series? How can they become a follower and get your books?
Oh, just best thing to do is go to my website, alanhesse.com, ALANHESSE.com. And I'm actually putting up a shop on that website. Not quite ready yet, but people will be able to buy the books directly from me on the website. But in the meantime, they're on, of course, digital and paperback on Amazon and other stores online. But all the links are right now on my website, so that's probably a good place to go. People can sign up to the newsletters. They can join the Captain Polo's own fan club. He has his own fan club where he writes his own blogs, and you can download the first book in the series as an ebook for free. And there's other stuff to download as well, free resources as well.
All right. Well, look for my name popping up on there soon, because I'm going to check it out for sure.
Yeah, great. That would be great, George.
I love what you're doing. Sure. Alan, thank you so much for your time coming on today, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Good luck to you. Your films, really important message you've got getting out there. So good luck with that. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me on this week's Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. If you enjoyed what you were listening to, it would be really helpful to us if you would not only like it and leave a nice review, but also share the link to the podcast with your friends, so hopefully they can become listeners too. And if you have somebody in mind that you think might make an interesting guest, there is a contact form on our website, tellushowtomakeitbetter.com. You go to the website, fill out the contact form, let me know who they are, and I'll reach out to them and see if they'll be a right fit. Once again, thanks for your time and stopping by today. We'll see you next time.